Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at in the world. To all of you out in the audience, thank you for joining us today for the 8th episode. Wow, 8 episodes. I can't believe we're still going. Of Screens Unscripted. This series of Fireside Chats is meant as an opportunity to explore innovations and trends in digital signage and display technology with industry subject matter experts like our outstanding guest today. I do continue to see familiar names in the audience, so some of you clearly have decision-making problems. But for those of you returning, welcome back. And for those of you that are new to the series, we're glad to have you on board. We hope you find this informative. Now, I'm going to do just a quick intro for everybody who is new. My name is Jonathan Braun. I'm a principal at Braun Consulting. I'm on the board of directors of the Digital Signage Federation, and I'm a director of the Digital Signage Expert Group. And as always, before I go any further, I don't want to risk any public humiliation or potential death threats. I have to make sure that I thank our sponsor, Sony, for helping make this series possible. Without their efforts, and of course our wonderful guests, this would not be possible. And Sony is a proud advisory council member to the Digital Signage Federation, so we greatly appreciate their support. Today we do have a very special guest with us, but just real quickly before I ask him to introduce himself and give us a little bit of background, I do want to do a bit of housekeeping for the audience. Those of you who've done this before, this is redundant. For all of you new, this should hopefully help. As you probably heard from the message when we started the broadcast today, everyone's on mute. Please use the chat or Q&A boxes from the GoToWebinar toolbar. It's going to be on the right-hand side of your screen, unless you moved it, at which point I have no idea where you put it. You're on your own. That way you can communicate with myself or our esteemed guest. And also, please do submit any questions you have. I will help facilitate those when we get to Q&A later in our talk. Also, I always get the question via email, so we'll head this out. We are recording this today, so if any of your colleagues did not have the opportunity to attend or you want to share this with someone, you'll get an automated email from GoToWebinar with a link. But also, Sony is being kind enough to post this on their YouTube channel for us, so you can always find it there, as well as the other episodes if you want to go back and review. Also, last but not least, this is a continuing and ongoing series of discussions with industry luminaries. Please, by all means, stay tuned for future episodes. But if you have suggestions for topics or other things you'd like to hear about, let us know. We really appreciate the feedback, and myself and the team at Sony will review that, and we'd love to have that kind of input. So please, by all means, share them with us. Okay, so what everybody's absolutely here for, we have a very special guest today with us from BrightSign. Even though I don't look good in purple, I am really looking forward to the conversation today. And of course, our topic today is going to focus on media players. That's a shock, given who our guest is, of course. A very interesting topic in current digital signage. So I'd like to thank our special guest for joining us. So Steve, thank you for being here. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, give us a little bit of your background and a little bit about BrightSign.
All right, well, thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate you having me on today. And of course, as you noted, thanks to Sony for hosting this series. Excited to be here today. And just for me, the background, my name is Steve Durkee. I'm the CEO of BrightSign. Been in that role for about 18 months. Been great, having a ton of fun. Been in the industry, it's been a long time now. I guess I'm getting older, but been in the industry since 2004. I was previously with a business that is now, Legrand AV was Milestone, and Chief, and Thanis, and Daylight, and all those sort of brands. So it's been a ton of fun really watching the evolution of the digital signage marketplace during that time. So and it's been fun to be in different places along that journey as well. And now currently with BrightSign, one thing I knew BrightSign very well. I got a real appreciation for how well the brand is known in general. The more time that I've been here, so I will describe what it is, but I thought it might be interesting to tell the history a little bit, because it'll set the stage, I think, for to talk about, where is the industry going. But BrightSign in general, just the corporate version, is it makes purpose-built hardware and software for digital media players. So we're going to talk about digital media players, but some people don't know how it started. In particular, you talked about purple. Do you know why it's purple? You might know why it's purple.
I know I have heard the story from Jeff before, but I think it's worth sharing, because I know while most of our audience probably knows BrightSign, I mean, I'm willing to bet, I really like the idea of telling them a little bit of history, and I'd love you to tell them the story of why it's purple.
Yeah, so the BrightSign was founded over 15 years ago, and it spun out, Jeff Hastings spun it out from the very early days of Roku. So now you know where the purple comes from, because it spun out from Roku in those days. And the reason he started this business and the problem he was solving is actually the same things we're working on today. I think it'll be an interesting discussion about what that means today, because it means something different, but it was about reliability, about security, about performance, because the predominant way to do digital signage at the time was with PCs, and we all use PCs, so this isn't a bash PC session. This is just, they are meant to do hundreds, if not thousands, of different things for different people. And so you end up, when you deploy them at scale, you end up with PC type problems. And Jeff thought he had ways to make that better. So, that's the purpose built. We say that, but what we mean by that is it's designed for one thing. It does digital signage. So when the software stack is built that way, it only runs one executable, reducing your threat vector for security issues. We know it's trying to do digital signage. So if something happens and it stops, we know what you're trying to do. We don't have to guess when you're on, if your laptop stops, it doesn't know what you're trying to do. We can restart it. We can reconfigure the memory, reconstitute your presentation, self-heal with that. Designed it for the lifespans, running 24/7. The power supplies and the memories are different for commercial grade things. So that was built. And then the performance, when you write the code just to do media playback, you can do it. You can do it better. And the security thing that, for example, the CrowdStrike thing happened a few months ago didn't affect BrightSign players. So that's what he was solving. So that was a problem he saw as an opportunity. And of course, with the technology background Jeff had and the spin-off from Roku, he was able to bring that to this market. So we see those as the same things that we are doing today. We just do them in different ways as the market has grown, become more sophisticated. The ecosystems have changed, the resolutions have changed, the experiences have changed. So we've just evolved with that, but continue to really live to that foundational value proposition that it started so many years ago.
Outstanding. And yeah, I love the fact that that's where the purple came from. And it's such a key part of the brand that everybody recognizes. Like, I think anyone in the industry, across the room, you see that hint of purple poking out behind the screen, immediately, oh, that's a BrightSign player. Yes. There is no missing it. And of course, your team all doing every trade show in like head to toe purple doesn't hurt either. So definitely is part of the brand identity. And you hit some really important points. And so I always seem to end up starting the discussions for our episodes with kind of a bit of a hot take. And don't worry, I'm not going to throw any curveballs. I'm not like that. But I do want to.
I'm not a software engineer, but yeah.
That's okay. Don't worry. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do that to you. I like you better than that. But I'll save those kinds of questions for Jeff. I'll let him do the propeller head stuff. That's fine. But so I'm going to ask for a quick hot take here, because you pointed out some really important things. We're in an interesting spot in the signage industry where there are so many people who seem to just overlook the concept of media players, where it's just become, oh, the displays have system on chip built in, and that becomes the default setting. And that's fine, but I think there still really is a place for a separate media player. Now, you might pivot biased, but I'm going to ask you your thoughts. I assume you would agree that there is still value in using separate media players versus what might be built into the flat panels.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I would just say beyond the chair I'm sitting in for this, we do focus on what our customers are trying to do for experiences, and the reality is in many instances the power required, the capabilities required, just exceed that of what you would put in. Again, not bashing any of that. What would you put in a consumer TV? There's some limitations to what you put in that. So we actually offer with partners, sometimes we put it in there, but it's a BrightSign player. So we take the box off, so we can do that. But the player itself, I mean, there's even those have limitations to the performance that you can get out of those. So in that case, you go to the player and you put the player on, and you've got the capabilities that you need for that experience. In addition, one of the things that sometimes gets forgotten when you look at is the operating systems on built-in chip don't get upgraded. So we're constantly upgrading. So at some point it just stops playing on the content, doesn't work, and it's not a process to go back and update those. Again, we work with a lot of great display partners and do things, but that is just foundationally how they build the TV. And so we definitely see that opportunity. Media players make a ton of sense, and we can change form factors, but we also believe that you want to be updated, you want to have the power you need for the experience, and you want to have options. So a lot of our rollouts as well will be this player for this part, this player for this part, because the experiences, as the sophistication goes up, the experiences are more bigger variety of experiences across across the rollout.
That makes sense. And it's an important thing because I mean, it is easy to default to, oh, I've got a player. It comes with the screen because the SoC type vendors tend to just give the player away. You're buying it automatically. But yeah, I mean, you're hitting a point, not to poke at Roku or anybody, because like I will get hate mail from somebody about that, or worse yet, somebody will pass back to Jeff that I said that in public, and then I'll get a phone call. But it's you see a lot of those consumer technologies, and I think you highlighted something important where I don't use the built-in smarts of any of my TVs I own. I usually end up equipping them with a dedicated streaming box because I want more power. So it kind of approaches the same thing for signage, right? And so I think you've highlighted some key ones there, like power is one, different form factors. So what would you say are going to be the top benefits to using an external player versus the built-in ones for someone who's having that debate? Like if we're talking to an end user who's now sitting there and figuring out, okay, I'm buying signage. What direction am I going to go?
Well, I mean, I'm glad I told the founding story because it's really a similar type thing. You are going to look at longevity, and that's longevity for the player as well as the player inside as well the TV. So the longevity of having a product that's going to last a long time, and then the security that we provide, that's differential. That's a big, cybersecurity is a major concern for people.
Oh, yeah.
And so, as you look at those things, you're going to differentiate on the performance too. And now, you knew we were going to get to the buzzword. I saw one in your previous episode talking about buzzword bingo, but this is real. So you can't have a discussion without talking about AI. But what we're seeing is people want to future-proof of it. It is moving so quickly that we're seeing people say, I've got to make sure, even if my current application doesn't require the horsepower that, one of our players, the next model up, they're saying, I need to put that in. Because it's expensive to go do it again later, and our players last. We just launched our 5-year warranty standard. They last so long, like it's going to be there for you. And I used to say this. The other thing, when you think about investing in a technology that's more robust in any part of an AV system, because I was used to being the infrastructure part, and I used to talk about how do we add value to our partners, and they would look at a particular product, compare the specs. But AV is complicated. I saw an interesting note the other day about how. So it was someone put a note outside that AI seems hard, but AV seems impossible some days, and so, and it is, and so if you can de-risk an installation, there is so much to worry about in installation. If you can de-risk an installation, it is worth that investment, and getting the right player is a start, but even sometimes getting ahead of the next rollout or next content you think you're going to be is really a very, very wise investment in money.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And that's a great kind of discussion because that leads into a couple other points I want to ask. I'm going to get to the warranty thing because we're going to have to talk about longevity and talk about things like MTBF and what that means, because I think there's some implications here. And by the way, I'm going to own up to my bias. I come at it from, I'm an SoC guy because I work with great companies like Sony. Yeah. And so I kind of default to that, even though I get where you're talking about from when I got started in signage. It was back when all we had was a Windows PC, and that has huge security implications. The point where a lot of customers too, I suppose you and your teams benefit, they don't want to even allow Windows computers for signage anymore because it's just too risky and also too much IT overhead to manage, right? So there's a bunch of points there I want to kind of to get at, because I like the idea of helping people understand selecting media players. I teach classes on that at Infocom, at least I have in the past, and at Digital Signage Expo and things like that. And so I know it's a complex topic. So are there content related implications as well here? So we're talking about longevity. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Talk about power. That makes sense because you're getting a much more powerful engine than typically the system on chip that you get in a display. That's not to say they don't have a place if you need simple signage or you want that integrated experience. I'd say it's bad, right? I don't need to hit the hitmen from Sony showing up at my address saying, hey, the SoC in a Pro Bravia is great where it makes sense. But then you hit, okay, so what if I want something that's hot swappable, or what if I want something that's separate from the screen, or what if? So are there content related implications to this here for the customers they should consider? Because I know you offer products with different like resolution outputs and things. Does that make sense that is it interactive? Is it video walls? Is it weird display sizes or shapes? Do these things matter in selecting a media player?
Yeah, and as noted, not being the software engineer, all of the different pieces in the middle of this, of what I'm going to describe, I won't be able to give every scenario there, but you think about it, a simple sign, I just want to show something, maybe it's just even static. Okay, that may be a lot simpler. And then you go all the way to 8K LED walls. Well, that just takes a different level of horsepower. We're actually working on something with Sony right now on a 3D solution that just requires a whole different level of horsepower. So I realize I went all the way to some of the very high-end use cases, but in between is that gradient where you do just have to have different levels of outputs. And then, then you get into, I want IO that matches the interactive experience, because now I've got cameras and touch sensors and different things that are being used. So all of those start to push the sophistication of your digital sign installation. Now you just need more processing power. And then you get to the next phase is, and this is, I've actually been sitting in on a think tank on AI, and we've been trying not to use AI as the thing we're talking about. What's the use cases of what you do with AI? And we were just showing at ISE the ability to run to use the NPU, so the neural processing unit, on our players, so that you're not even touching the CPU that's running, or the graphics part that's running your digital signage. You are running on a totally separate part of the chip, and people are using it. We showed a simple example, but am I looking at am I interacting with the content? It's different. It can tell if you're standing there looking over here or you're standing there looking at it, but it's running AI models for the processing power on the edge. So you're not going and spending the money to go to the cloud and run it and bring it back. You don't have connectivity concerns. You run it on the edge. Enough edge AI would help with our data center needs. But we're starting to do that as well, because people are trying to do that. So you just see those kinds of things just were never the intention of our display partners and building SoCs.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great because you keep bringing up things that I was going to bring up anyway, so that makes it great. I do want to come back to AI, but we both mentioned 8K. And so I'm going to be a little bit of that controversial person, because I think in general, I bet there's a bunch of the folks out in the audience who are going, wait a minute, does 8K really matter? We've barely just figured out 4K. And even over on like the CI channel side for home theater, 8K is kind of struggling, because a lot of people are asking, why do I need that? I mean, you always have the high net worth individuals who buy the 8Ks because they say amazing. It's like, oh, I've got an 8K TV, ooh, shiny. Is 8K really relevant to current digital signage? It sounds like, in your opinion, in BrightSign's opinion, yes, that it is.
Well, what I'd say is it was, for me, that was more of an example of how when you get to the processing power needs. But there's a lot in between that you need that processing power. So I just thought that was a good example. And frankly, I just had a conversation about an application this morning on that. I was referring to a real live application we just did to do in a high-end retailer that did an 8K video wall that just required our highest end player. So it just was top of mind probably, but I would still say our position, if you're asking BrightSign, would be it's still a niche application. But what people rely on BrightSign for is we can do all those. So we have to be capable of doing those. But I wouldn't say right now that I'm gonna have a hot take that 8K is really gonna take over. We don't see that. We certainly see the things like the IoT integration and the interactivity, and also we can talk about, and the AI capabilities, again, running AI models to make it more to make it more personalized, smarter. That's for sure. We see that much more of a driver than 8K, but it was a good example for when you need more horsepower.
Yeah, no, and what you mentioned, like, so 3D. So Sony's got the spatial reality display, which is incredibly cool. By the way, folks, if you get the opportunity to see one in person, really good glasses-free 3D tech is incredible. And I don't say that because Sony's the sponsor of the show. I really think it's incredibly impressive to see it. But that kind of tracks where maybe it's not about necessarily 8K is using it because everybody cares about the 8K resolution, but almost like demonstrating as a performance metric where we can do 8K, but then we could also drive something like that 3D screen, which needs a lot more horsepower. Or like you mentioned, so one of the other trends that has happened, it's not just the AI buzzword bingo where somebody's got to say it in every episode, but the other one that keeps coming up, and I'm glad you brought it up, Steve, is analytics, where we're doing more of that kind of edge compute at the media player level. And I think that's a strong argument for external media players, because now, not just the AI calculations, but like if I've got analytics where I'm trying to use, whether it's cameras or interactive, I'm using it for different things, whether it's shelf facing or stocking or watching interactions, right? This has become a key part of a lot of CMS. So that kind of sounds like we're saying the choice of media player really matters for this, because if I'm looking at analytics, I need a powerful enough device to handle that. so that I'm not getting my numbers back 2 days later because I had to send it out and crunch it in the cloud, right?
Yeah, no, we are absolutely. That's why, that's why it was a good lead in with the 8K. We're not seeing that many of them. We absolutely are working on projects with cameras, interactive sensors, analytics. You go back to when I talked about being this associated with the industry for a long time. The goal has always been personalized content, right? You want to know who you're talking to. If you could ideally know their profile, you change the ad or you change the message to that person directly. And it's getting closer with the analytics. You got to watch the privacy issues and all those things you have to manage, but the horsepower to understand your audience and do the analytics and provide real-time content and even create real-time content based on what you're seeing is here, and I think people are starting to take advantage of that.
Yeah, that whole hyper targeting, that's something that's come up time and time again. We've had several CMS vendors on the show, and that's something that just keeps naturally getting mentioned, where it's like, look, I want to communicate to Steve at a place where I can have an impact on your decision making, because I kind of joke about digital signage is one of the most effective performance and decision influencing things that we have that's not a pharmaceutical. It's the most behavior modification tool we have, and it works incredibly well, but we have to get the right messaging. So having more powerful compute, I can see where that would make sense. And that kind of goes back to AI, which I want to poke at that a little bit more because I think it's something that so many people want to hear about. My dad, Alan, wrote a whole series of articles for, I believe it was Commercial Integrator, just on AI for people in our industry. And I'm sure he's actually watching, and I'm going to get a comment after that I gave him a shout out on the show. So, okay, shameless plug. But it's really interesting. I think a lot of our audience is thinking about AI and maybe thinking about the ideal of AI more than the practicality of it. But how do you see that getting used in signage? What you can share about projects that you're working on, and then where do you see that changing in the near future as our devices continue to improve?
Yeah, I think, in AI, when you say that term, I do think a lot of people think, oh, it's thinking by itself. And it's like, well, there's a different version of that, a way to think about it, which is processing power. You can run significant number of calculations very, very quickly. And so it's not necessarily always learning in AI. You are just able to tap into powerful models and run them, like I said, on the edge. And that's what this whole even eye tracking we were doing, just to take a simple analytics, which is, we were talking about a trade show. Now we'd have to post all over that we're tracking people and kind of privacy side, but envision if that's all okay, I can now look at, we have all these displays for a digital signage media player company, and we could, at the end of the show, we could say which content got the most real engagement, actual eyeballs looking at it for a period of time. That's just there's an AI model for that, and the models are growing. So what's happening now is the models are starting to grow, and so people are ready to use them. Our CMS partners are absolutely starting to figure out how to use those models. There will be a day that you can get to the point where you tie the models together and it starts to adjust content and do things. But early on, we're already seeing people take advantage of the processing power to make the experience differential. And that's here now. So that's what I think people get hung up like, well, I don't know, it's out there, I don't know what it's going to do. It's like, no, that's happening right now. So that's what I would tell people is those things are happening immediately. The actual sort of learn on its own and make decisions might be a little farther away.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've even seen some experimental work being done into like analyzing emotional response based on someone's expression, where that's in its infancy. That's a little scary, because that does require a little more perception out of our AI, where, we haven't built Skynet. We're not going to plug it into the nukes, so everybody's safe. The audience doesn't have to be disappointed. We did get to AI naturally as a topic. It does come up all the time. I think everybody's going to stick AI on like the product name somewhere just to try and get. I bought a new laptop recently and it came with a co-pilot button, and it's an AI specific model. I'm going, I don't use any of that, but okay, fair enough.
Well, it's putting to my AI think tank note on. What I would tell everybody is, if you're not using some form of ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot every day, you're missing out on the opportunity to learn more about how it's working. That will help our industry. That will help us get more people to be comfortable with it, what it can do, get more familiar with the technology. and then it'll help drive, we would like us in the digital signage industry or an AV industry, let us lead the experience. What can we now do from an experience perspective by taking advantage of that topic?
Oh, absolutely. It even almost becomes, and I think more integrators are starting to understand this for our integrator partners out on the line. I think that it's almost becoming a troubleshooting tool where I've seen programming done with it, where someone says, look, write me a Crestron driver that does X, Y, and Z with components 1, 2, and 3, and using something like ChatGPT to do that. I find that interesting, but even more so, I could almost see a team like yours where you've got media players to support, but you've got a fixed set, almost that Apple model, a fixed set of hardware and software with BrightSign OS, right? Where, yeah, you may have different CMS partners running, but you know what the underpinning is. So you could almost leverage AI-based tools to help with troubleshooting to where it can make the team more efficient.
We absolutely are. We're making an investment right now that is behind the scenes, because one of the early use cases I think people can adopt fairly simply is in your customer experience, your customer support model. And so we will be putting in engines behind the scenes that not only help our team, but ultimately give direct access to our partners, so that you think about the technical type questions we get. Sometimes it requires, you got to go to this manual and you got to go to this document, you got to go to this document. That's what AI is good at. It can look at that contextual exchange that you've had, and if we just store all those exchanges, I bet we've answered the same question a bunch of times. So we'll not only be using it in our product, we'll be using it in our support so that we can quickly, and what a lot of people are getting comfortable with is, I'm fine if I don't talk to somebody that second, just answer my question that second. Okay, good, type it in. We'll give you the resources. It points to where to go. That's all coming from us. That's clearly we're using it inside the business as well as in our products.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, because I like that idea of customer experience being so key, because that's what I think so much of not just digital signage, and you've probably seen it across your career pre-BrightSign too, was, we've seen this transition away from people focusing on products and people focusing, and we see it in signage too. It's not about the products, it's about the user experience and the outcome. And so much of what we do in signage is experiential. That's part of the value proposition why people buy signage in a lot of cases. And I do have one other topic I want to explore a little bit, because we're going to come up on and get into Q&A. Before we go to that, I got a couple of other kind of ideas I want to poke at, since you were kind enough to join us and share your expertise. So I think one of the other aspects of why an external media player might make sense for customers to consider is, and you mentioned it early on when you were talking about the history of BrightSign and some of what BrightSign does, is dealing with diverse display ecosystems, where, and you're kind of seeing it now, where you might have one vendor like a Sony supplying the flat panel, but you may have somebody else completely supplying DV-LED, and then you may have a specialty display product that's yet again a third vendor. And it can sometimes be difficult to standardize on a single platform. Not always, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. So it would really make sense that an external media player solution, if we standardized on a product like yours for an installation, that then becomes easier for the end user to manage that entire ecosystem. Would that be a fair thing to say?
And probably a good lead in for me, because I was probably remiss not knowing it, but I think you know this, but I mean, we actually start our conversations with customers about selecting BrightSign and is by the operating system, the BrightSign OS. Because the BrightSign OS is the same across our whole portfolio. So sometimes people say, well, which one should I get? Well, let's talk about what you're trying to do. Let's talk about the operating system, which is key to that reliability and security and performance. And then that's the same across the platform. So now as a partner, you can pick and choose from our portfolio of products for those experiences you need, but you can run them and manage them all the same. So you can do what you were describing, but you get the benefit of, you can actually use different models based on what you want to do, and then but still run it as if it's one product line, because it's all running the same operating system.
Right, and if you've got a CMS that supports your platform, then chances are it's also going to support some of the other platforms if they do want to kind of combine that too. So, because you've got a pretty diverse group of CMS partners, like I know our friends at Sony do as well, that you work with, that have standardized on, hey, we're going to offer a player component for BrightSign OS, right? Yeah, no,
we clearly been a big investment last year. We launched Bright Alliance to really formalize our partnership with the CMS partners, make it more strategic, work closely together. So definitely have it. And we didn't cover it yet, and I'll let us get to Q&A. But as the digital signage has gotten more sophisticated, the ecosystem's more and more important. Partnerships across the ecosystem to make an experience work. It's the channel partners, it's the integration partners, it's the CMS partners, it's the display partnerships, it's the media player, all that. And so we've really leaned in heavily to make sure that we're, well connected, well integrated with the whole ecosystem to create that experience.
No, that's a really key point, and I think that's something that is important to share with the audience, because no single product does it on its own. There really is no company that can say we're completely turnkey, you can work with just us, and we can do everything for you. There are some integration partners that do managed services, but even then, they become your one point of contact. They're still going out to a BrightSign and a Sony and a Jeep
for sure,
to source all the components. So you need to build that ecosystem, and the CMS vendor is obviously a very key component of that. And it really isn't one size fits all, or even most. You really need a good ecosystem of different partners to make sure you're getting what the end user requires. I mean, I've worked with tons of different CMS vendors and different media player vendors and others across my career, whether I'm designing a project or not, or helping support on behalf of a manufacturer. Yeah, that's a really important thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. Tons of great information, but we are getting some questions come in. I do want to go to Q&A. I do want to give you an opportunity if there's anything else you want to share with the audience, and I'm going to ask you for a small favor. We do this for everybody we have on the show, but if there's anything else you want to share, of course, please do, giving you the opportunity. But if you could also leave our audience with 2 or 3 key takeaways from our discussion today, what would those be?
Well, I think, first of all, thanks. I don't know if we run into questions, run over, but I appreciate the opportunity to tell a story about BrightSign. I mean, I think we've hit on some of those key things. Digital signage is one of the fastest growing verticals in AV, has been for a long time. Exciting place for all of us to be. It's going to continue to be a growth opportunity. So as I speak more generically about the industry, I think anybody that's listening, it is a market to focus on. We've seen, for example, the integration market really start to expand, their integrators start to expand their capabilities in digital signage, because it saw one of your previous episodes as it expands in workplaces and those sorts of things. So it's definitely a growth opportunity. At BrightSign, we're leaning in on all of those areas to support, to enable, what we describe as attract, engage, and captivate partners. I mean, we know at the end of the day, we're trying to support our end customers' experience. And so we think we've got the tools to do that, and we'd just love to help anybody that's out there saying, I heard some of the stuff you said, prove it. Come show you can do that for us. And you can go to brightsign.biz, where we have all of that information out there. You can follow us on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me as well. But it is a really exciting time for digital signage. And even if some of the things we talked about, you said, I want to do that, but I don't know how. Again, reach out. We're happy to help and happy to connect the ecosystem of partners that make the most sense for that experience. So I've appreciated being able to tell our story a bit and talk about the industry.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate you being here and doing that. Okay, I think we've tap danced a bunch. We've got some questions coming in, so let's hit you with them and see what we've got. I love it when we get an engaged audience, and I have yet to have it where we've got no questions. This was no exception. So this is pretty good. And we have actually a fair few here. So I'm going to start at the top and we'll go down here. And thank you all for submitting questions. If you have any more, go ahead and throw them in the chat. If we don't make it to them today, we'll make sure we do get you answers. But in all AV markets, isn't increased resolution like 4K or more less about getting 4K or 8K on one screen or frame, in quotes, and more about using the higher res than to be able to allocate high res imagery in a tiled or multi-screen scenario? Boy, that was a complex one. I actually think we kind of addressed that when I brought up the 4K 8K.
Yeah, and I will admit, I said up front, I'm not the application expert. I just started my life as an engineer, but not the application. What I would say I hear more about, so I won't say with the definitively this is bigger than that, but we talk a lot more about using that resolution to spread out into either areas in a display or multiple displays. But the 8K, just I haven't seen it as much. I probably should ask our team now, but I will when we leave. But that hasn't come up. It's been more about using that very high resolution to actually spread it across into other panes or frames inside of another display.
Perfect. This is an interesting one. So we talked about analytics, and I think that's probably what spawned this one. What will be the privacy law will create impact. Okay, so what will be the impact of privacy laws on analytics? We are doing lift and learn and presence sensing for personalized content, but we get some flack on gender sensing technology with someone with other preferences. That's an interesting point. And usually something that comes up when we talk about analytics is how will privacy laws impact things? What do you see? Since you're also approaching from the hardware side and helping enable the software, but you're not necessarily developing all the analytics software yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point. I think maybe all I can offer is that is going to be move very carefully, move very slowly. I think when in doubt, based on what I see as the tone of the discussion around AI and some of those things, it's going to be, not that you can't do that, but you've got to get permission. And it's really, how do you get permission for people just walking by a display? So that's going to take some work. So I think those things now in more confined spaces where you're going in to take a look at a demo or something like that, where it says you're okay to watch. We're going to watch this analytics, but I think the privacy is going to throttle back a little on how fast some of that stuff can get used. And not here to debate the politics of it. That's just the reality of it, what's going to happen. And we're seeing that. I mean, every website, when you're in Europe and you pop by, every website says, "Are you okay?" So if that's what they're asking you just for content on your screen, it's going to be global. And by the way, it's like security. The laws are going to be different as you go global.
Sure.
So that's also going to make it a little bit more challenging. So great question. I don't have the perfect answer of how to solve it. I just say that yes, it will impact the ability to roll out at scale with some of those analytics.
Yeah, well, and some of that, it will be impacted by the end user, right? Where, like, we talk about a retailer, it's going to be a little bit of a different discussion with like a mass market, like a Target or a Walmart, but it's going to change completely if you're talking like a BJ's or a Costco, where they could write that into the membership, where it's like, oh, you're going to consent to analytics if you want to shop.
And it might even change with, everybody's got apps for these locations too. So if you say, "I'm okay, you can track me, I'm walking around and you can keep track of me," that you could tell them that. And that's the type of stuff I think is going to have to develop in standard language for people to make that roll out at scale. But so then it might be rolled out at scale, but not used at scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. That's a great point. So we had to get a question on AI. I figured it was going to come up, so this is good. AI has the obvious applications in generative or agenic creation of content. Okay, thank you for the question asker using agenic creation. Appreciate that. But isn't there an even greater revolution coming when AI is used more by the viewer or shopper or customer to look for the brands and solutions they need? Won't that lead to a huge shakeout in brands? And then maybe better digital, I like this, and maybe better digital signage or omni-channel can help build your brand back up. That's fascinating. That would have been a great question when we did the retail media networks episode.
That is a great question for them. I will say that, definitely generating content, and that's back to and I'll come to the note there, but it's great insight. Also, you learn on these in both directions all the time, right? So, but the generating content, I think, is absolutely coming, and it can make content, and the same with ones like when we have marketing teams. It's going to replace. It doesn't replace what they do. You can just do a lot more stuff with that. You can create content. I think generating content that is built on the analytics there locally could be really interesting. On the other side of that, where someone can sort of rebuild their brand with AI from an end user, I mean, and you think about this augmented reality. I considered getting a pair of those glasses that they put on and is telling you stuff about, and that might be part of the product. Like, I'm okay in that if I walk through one of these stores, you can show me stuff, and boom, it can highlight a brand for me when it starts to know me more. And so the ability for that IoT connection with something that I have, I think is going to change that. And I don't have a specific view on how, but I think we all agree it will change how we interact. And the omni-channel is a good note too, because it'll change if I'm on your website, which you can tell usually if I'm logged in or something, and then I go into your store. What if it was like, that the interactivity glasses just highlights in bright yellow the thing I was looking at? I'm not looking around and search. So that type of engagement and connection is going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And even things like, if we're talking about omnichannel, like you mentioned, the app on your phone, every brand has an app. I'm a little sick of how many apps you have installed. And the fact that with things like we discussed in previous episodes, like beacon technology and other things, and as we make the media players more powerful and we get more edge compute there, where all of a sudden now it picks up, hey, this is Jonathan's phone. He's got the app. Here's the things he's searching for. Maybe I'm sending him notifications to the phone. Hey, you're in proximity to a product you've searched. It's
Yes.
on sale. Amazon's starting to do that sort of thing with their app. So it's not a light year jump to say, okay, wait a minute.
No, not at all. I think that's the other thing that came out of some of this discussion in think tank was just get going, and because if you wait, the world's going to move right by you because they're already using these technologies. But again, especially in some of the privacy areas, you got to navigate that. But when you do, I think it's going to move pretty quickly. So for those in the audience that are doing those experiences directly, I think if it's not already something you're building proposals on, probably should be soon. And again, happy to help if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have one more question here. I know we're gonna come up on time, but I'm gonna do this one because one, it was targeted specifically at me, and the question asker happens to be a very dear friend of mine, so he's gonna get a pass on that. But this, I feel a little triggered here, so this is that we got to do this one. We got to. Isn't the old SOC versus external media player, i.e., choose one or the other, kind of outdated? How many deployments have you seen where you have both in one rollout? That's not only is that a good question, but that was a direct pot shot at me. And thank you, by the way, David, for that one. I appreciate that, friend. That was great.
Yeah, so I would say, again, my experience in the past 18 months here is we don't really count where there are multiple, but a lot of the bigger rollouts aren't doing multiple. They're deciding because, and at least that I'm experienced with, that the bigger deployments are saying we want to manage this thing the same throughout, and we're picking our solution for the media player to do that. Now, I think where it might be different, and we don't necessarily, I should say might be different. We know like in the workplace environment, probably just so many different types of displays and types of applications, and so forth. But when you're doing sort of the bigger sort of retail transportation, all that, the stadiums, I'm not personally hearing about it, and they probably are some, but it doesn't feel like it's, hey, we're doing 20% of these and 30% of those and 10% of those. It's just too complicated from the larger rollouts, but I'm sure it exists. So I think we really want to focus the debate on, we're not, we work closely with our display partners. What are you trying to do? And let us help solve that experience problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I agree. I think it's an interesting one where if someone's going to use an external player, I think they're standardizing on it for a reason. And it becomes, like we were talking about earlier, the standard across the various display ecosystem, where you might get a one-off where they say, look, we've got a display with an SoC. We're going to have a very simple use case for it. Maybe I won't spend the money on the extra player, but I'd say that's probably more the outlier rather than, I think it's probably more where somebody standardizes on SoC from the first place, and then they say, oh, well, for this occasional screen, maybe I need a BrightSign player for like my DV LED, where it doesn't have an SoC.
And it's noted, I do think that, if you start with what you're trying to accomplish for our end customer, and you usually very quickly get to, yeah, I might want to do that. Oh yeah, I might want to do that. Oh yeah, I might want to do that. And you go, you're going to need this. And so, we can work with the play partner to make that work, but you're going to want to get the horsepower you need for that application. Now, maybe they're close in some simple applications, but the way it's trending, they're not going to be, the experience I'm talking about is going to be more sophisticated going forward. And that's just, sort of why we have those products.
Yeah, makes sense. I did get one last one I'm going to try and squeak in that came in right as we were getting ready to wrap up, but I think it's a good one because I think somebody heard your comment about the 5-year warranty earlier, and so they snuck one last question about longevity concerns. So if you don't mind, I want to bounce this one off you because I think it is an important one. It's one that I would actually like to ask too. So, what about longevity concerns and warranty support? Is having an external player actually better for system longevity, MTBF? But I think the more important aspect of this one is commercial displays with SoC come in with 3 to 5 year on-site warranties, but my external players have a depot warranty. Is my only answer to buy extra players? Bit of a run-on question, but I think it's important because the longevity aspect, I think, is something a lot of people are considering. And then the warranty, that didn't even occur to me, but that's a legitimate concern. Okay, so do I just stock hot spares, or how do you and your team recommend people handle that?
Well, for big deployments, I will tell you this first on the BrightSign stuff. I mean, we have series one, we're on series 5, and they come out every few years. So back to the start of the founding story, like we have original series products still running in the field.
Wow.
So I mean, I would definitely can say with the utmost confidence that your BrightSign player is going to be the least of your concern. And so we backed it up with the 5-year warranty. And now I saw some chatter online, but I heard, oh, it's not the first 5-year warranty. Well, you could buy 5-year warranties. We're saying it's free. It comes with the price of that. That's the first that we've seen in the marketplace. As we are offering this, we're backing that up. But yes, in large deployments, people could carry spares for all the stuff that could be an issue. But I would like to say, I can say with a lot of confidence that it won't be your BrightSign players that turn out to be your problem, but we'll back those up. And if you do ever have an issue with them, that the warranty kicks in and we make sure we repair or replace it for you as part of the process. But if in best practice, people should probably in large deployments have spares of everything. I just don't think you need many BrightSigns.
Fair enough. Yeah, displays are no different. You know,
yeah, and we're fast and we'll support it. So if someone didn't want to, like, I got a warranty. So if the question was, well, I have a warranty, do I still have to buy some extras? Like, yeah, we don't do a warranty where we send you a bunch of extras because we don't think we're going to get them back. So we would just take care of it quickly. But it definitely is something we have lots of very old players in the market running. And that's, by the way, we didn't get a hit on it, but I will say I want to make sure this is just the unscripted thing that we have. This isn't a marketing, This isn't a commercial, but it's on the sustainability side. The first thing you do to make things sustainable in a circular economy is just don't make them last a long time. Yeah. So you aren't getting rid of them and having to do something with them. And that's really where we lean in at BrightSign.
Absolutely, that makes a ton of sense. And I'm sure that's important to a lot of our audience. So I'm glad you brought that up. We are right at time. So I want to be respectful of our guest's schedule. So I'm going to say, first of all, Steve, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you participating, sharing your insights with us. Normally, I'd say, where can people go to learn more about BrightSign? But you did a great job plugging that earlier with the website and LinkedIn. So really appreciate that. Anything else you want to say to the audience before we wrap up? Here's your chance for a shout out if you want to give any plugs.
Well, no, look, I think I noted earlier about, but we genuinely, for anybody that's out there, I mean, I'm very serious, like to reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll connect you with the right person. We'd love to help. I appreciate that people are taking the time to listen to this discussion and learn more about us. And hopefully the questions are great. I was learning from those questions. We're trying to share what we can, but I appreciate the time everybody had. And I hope in some cases it just piques some interest of what's maybe possible in signage. And that's what we're focused on, is helping make what seems the impossible possible. So thanks for having me on, Jonathan. Appreciate it again. Thanks, Sony, for sponsoring us and everybody for taking the time to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. So Steve, thank you so much. Also, thank you to our friends at Sony for sponsoring all of this. And as Steve said, thank you to all of you out in the audience for taking your time out. It's not just our guests who are busy. I know how busy you all are too, and really appreciate you carving some time out of your day to come and listen to these, especially for those of you I see who are returning guests. Thank you all so much. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all again. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and stay tuned for the email for the recording, or go check it out on the Sony YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.